Joining me now to run through all of the top stories is Scarlett MccGwire, former Labour advisor, and Charlie Rowley, former Conservative Special Advisor. I just say, if you don't normally listen to the Jake Berry Show, and I've made a brief mention of the joy of text there, I think it's only the Jake Berry Show that does this on Talk Radio and Talk TV, is we read your text out. It's your opportunity to shine. So if you want to be on the show, if you haven't got time to call in, we'd love to hear from you. Send us a text and you might make the cut, because Charlie and Scarlett will be judging who has made the cut for the text. We talked about in the last hour this news which has just come out about the Greater Manchester Police investigating Angela Rayner. Charlie, this couldn't really happen at a worse time for the Labour Party. Keir Starmer's going all around the country. It's the run-up to local election campaigns. He's talking today about defence and trying to reposition the Labour Party as the party of security. This couldn't come at a worse time for him, frankly, could it?
That's absolutely right. The announcement today about defence spending and the nuclear deterrent will be overshadowed, obviously, by this story, because every shadow minister that goes on to any national broadcast is constantly being asked about Angela Rayner. And the more questions that are asked, the more that feeds into the public's mind that something may not have gone all right for her, that there is some sort of cover-up, even if there isn't. As you rightly say, she's denied all the allegations. But the fact that it's out there and the public are so distracted now by this story within the Labour Party, it doesn't help them in the run-up to the locals, as you say.
And let's be really clear about this. Some people have compared Angela Rayner. They basically say she's the Labour Party's Boris Johnson. But whatever you think about Angela Rayner, she's a really, really interesting and engaging and excellent politician. So just like when things used to happen to Boris, everyone talked about it. If anything happens to Angela Rayner, there's any allegations, she completely denies all of these allegations, then we just talk about it because she's such an interesting individual. And Scarlett, that is part of the problem, isn't it? We just love talking about Angela Rayner.
Well, I think in particular the Tories love talking about the problems of Angela Rayner. I haven't noticed, Jake, you talking much about her before. I mean, this is all about...
I've always talked... I have got a photograph of Angela Rayner pinned up. She is my pin-up in my office. I'm always talking about Angela Rayner, both positive and negative. I just think she's a really interesting politician.
She is really interesting, and she has real cut through the public. She's incredibly popular, not just with Conservative politicians, which I know she is. She's very, very popular in the Commons because she says what she thinks, and she's incredibly friendly, actually, and she'll talk to anybody. But what this is about, this really is about the Conservatives wanting a scalp. Labour's had too many. The Conservatives say, I think we've got one. I mean, so pressure is put, as you agree, pressure is put on the Greater Manchester Police to open an investigation. Angela denies everything and, you know, innocent until proved guilty, as you know, as
Well, I was taking the opportunity during the break to flick through Angela's Twitter, something I do all the time as I'm looking at her portrait up in my office. And I did note that on January the 25th, 2022, don't worry, Angela, I don't really do that, she tweeted, Boris Johnson's Downing Street is under a police investigation. How on earth can he now stay on as Prime Minister? So, Scarlett, I put to you, how on earth can Angela Rayner now stay on as Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, she's Prime Minister, under police investigation? Source for the goose must be source for the gander.
She is not running the country. She's not running a department.
Thank goodness.
She's a she'd be a great. Look, if Labour win the election and she gets in, she would be great. It would be. I mean, the civil servants, they'd all work for her. Things would actually happen.
They'd run rings around her. They wouldn't.
They absolutely wouldn't.
No. And let's just for our viewers and listeners at home, let's just set out what the core of these allegations are. Now, let me start off. I'm going to say it at the beginning, say it at the end. Obviously, say it for a second time. Angela Rayner denies all of this, that anything untoward has happened. But as I understand it, the core of the allegations are basically threefold. First of all, there is a question about whether Angela Rayner should have claimed a single-person discount on a second property that she owned, whether she was in fact living there as her principal residence. She says she was. The second question is, when that property was sold, should she have paid capital gains tax? Angela Rayner says she has had advice and she shouldn't have, and she didn't. And the third question, I think the question that the police are investigating, is under electoral law, you have to basically say which house you live in if you want to vote from there or stand for election. Angela Rayner had got married and very recently also had some very young children with her then husband. And the position was they were both registered as living in separate houses. I think I'm correct in saying that her children with her then husband were living at her husband's house, but Angela Rayner certified, for want of a better word, that she was living separately from her children and her and her newly married husband. They're the big questions. Angela Rayner says there's nothing to see here. But Scarlett, again, coming back to you, just for ordinary working people, isn't it a bit odd to be newly married, live in a different house, have kids, very young children, infant children with someone, live in a separate house, own 2 homes in the first place? It's just really... Well, whether she's done anything wrong or not is a moot point, and obviously the police are investigating. It's just really odd, isn't it?
OK, to begin with, owning 2 homes, we know that happened. We know that she owned one house, he owned another. No question about that. I mean, I think a lot of people would be very envious of being given the chance not to have to always live with your husband and young children. I mean, you know, lots of people,
Scarlett, are very envious of second homeowners wherever they be in the country. Like, God, it wasn't in Cornwall, she might have been. Well, they'd be around burning torches to get rid of. So she's a second homeowner. It's just not how ordinary people live, is it?
No, hold on, Jake. She owned a house. She then married a guy who also owned a house. Instead of selling it, she kept it. And probably, she says, she went on living there. Obviously not every night, right? But actually, she had the house. I mean, you know, it was a bolt hole so that she could get away from her children and husband, probably. Who knows? I mean, everybody lives their different lives, right? And I'm sure that we will find out more.
But yeah, that's absolutely true. But regardless, the reason this story is continuing to run and run is because Angela is refusing to say that. And she could easily go to the country and say, look, you know, I lived a very different life, maybe to other people. That was just my arrangements, nothing to see here, and move on. But the fact that the point-blank refusal to just acknowledge any of this, even if there is no wrongdoing, I think is just something that is a cataclysmic communication error by the Labour Party, where this story is now, as I say, taking up far too much time that they would rather it not do. But only if she would just explain it in a way that she would have been able to do. It's too late now.
But there's so many things you can't unravel it. So you can't unravel the fact that you claimed a single person's discount on a property. You can't.
Yes.
You know, that is an offence to do that if you in fact don't live there as your permanent residence. Now, of course, Angela says she did. You can't unravel the fact that you stood for election from a certain property. It's an offence under the Elections Act to pretend you live somewhere and stand for election. Angela Rayner denies that in and of itself. She cannot sort of move away from this story. It's funny enough, it's a bit like Boris Johnson with the parties in Downing Street, isn't it? You can't say, well, we held some parties, but I didn't really know about it. The minute you admit that one part of the story has a hole in it, then the whole thing will just collapse like a house of cards, surely, Charlie.
Yes, and that was the issue. You know, if Boris, look, you know, whatever you think about what he knew or didn't know, and you know, we know he wasn't a man of detail all of the time. He had some great qualities, and I, you know, think he was a great PM, and agreed with him more often than I did my own boss at times. But if he was able to seize the story earlier by saying, I don't know what's happened, but I'm looking into it, rather than a point-blank denial, which is the route that Andrew has gone down. If you say, oh, there might be an issue here, but it was very complicated because it was about tax, it was a family arrangement that was quite different, I'm owning up to it, and I'm allowing someone to come in.
I think the big challenge is it just doesn't feel like how most people live. Now, not everyone lives the same. We all live our own lives.